in this lesson, we're going to take a look at how to create a texture in Photoshop from a UV template that we created in 3ds Max. Alright, so go ahead and open up the carshell_uv.png file that you rendered out from the last lesson. And inside of here, we're going to go ahead and rename our layer. And this one's going to be UV. And normally I leave this layer on top, and then I'll create a brand new layer underneath it. And I'll call this something like background or base color, something like that. So we'll call that base color. And then I'm going to put in whatever base color I want for my object. So in this case, I really like that green color, so I'm just going to drop that in. And here you can see our UVs, and now we can begin to paint in specific details on this. So to get started, let's say that I want to put some text on my object. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab my text tool, and let's go ahead and bump up our text size. Let's go to something like 72. And might even go higher than that to get started here. So let's back up just a moment here, and I'm going to go ahead and switch my color to white. Type this in. I'm going to type in the word splash. Okay, and so with this, I can select my text, and I can come in and I can choose a particular font that I wanted to use for this. So really doesn't matter what we use. I think the one that I use for the final asset is this Blue Highway. You may not have this. You can use whatever you have available to you and whatever looks good to you. And I'm going to go ahead and bump up my size on my text. So let's do something like 200. See what that looks like. Okay, I think that's going to get me right where I need to go for right now. And let's put this into position. Okay, on our object. So this is going to go right along the side of our object. So it's important to take a look inside of 3ds Max and remember where this is actually positioned on your model. Now I know that this is right along that side, so I'm going to go ahead and put that into position. I can hit Control-T to transform it and rotate it. And I'm going to hold down Shift and scale that down along the corner, and hold down Alt to scale along the center. And then I'll just put that right in here. And I want to make sure that that is right in position. So that looks good. We can go ahead and rotate that. That's going to be right along that corner, if you'll remember. So I'm going to push this right over here. So now I can hit Enter, and then I can also right click and go to something like my blending options, and I could add a stroke to that. And if I select that stroke, I can change its color, and I'm going to change it to a blue color. And I'm going to make sure that that's true blue. And then adjust my size of my stroke there. So we'll go to something like, let's do 12. I think that might be a good value for us. And if you want, you can move that around with your Move tool, okay, just to get that positioned. So now I'm going to hit Control-J to make a copy of that. I'm going to put it on the other side of my object here. So I'm going to hit Control-T and just rotate that around. And then let's put that into position. So make sure that it doesn't go outside of your UV. So like if it's outside, it's going to get cut off and you won't see that on your model. So there we look pretty good. Going to hit Enter. And there we're going to have a splash on both sides of our car. Now we could come in and we could create another layer. So I'm just going to minimize those extra options there. I'm just going to use a new layer, and let's paint in a detail or a decal or something like that. Okay, and so I can use my paintbrush tool and adjust my diameter, and I can come in and paint in just like a specific type of detail or something like that. So something kind of look like splash, a splash design or something like that. Okay, and you can come in with like a Wacom tablet and you could really start to draw this out. I'm just kind of showing you how you could do this. I'm going to leave it up to you to be really creative and come up with your own design. So once you have that detail painted on there, let's say that I wanted to stroke just like we did with this here, I could actually create a copy of this. So I'm going to create a copy of this layer, and I'm going to hold down Control and then left click on that particular icon, and it's going to make a selection. I'm going to hit Select, Modify, and Expand, and I'm going to expand that by 12 pixels. Let's hit OK. And on this layer, I'm going to paint in a white color. So we'll paint that in. You can see that we've kind of stroked that out there. And now we can collapse both of those. So we'll merge those layers. And we'll say decal. And let's hit Control D to deselect that. And then we'll hit Control J to make a copy. And then we'll pull this down here. And then I'm going to hit Control T and just simply right click and flip vertical. So that way it's flipped around the other way. So we have a couple of decals here that we can create. You can do some other painting on this. Let's say that you want to do a blue sticker right down the front. You're more than welcome to do so. So going through this process, you'll go through and you'll render out several UVs, and you'll save these, and then you'll apply those to your model. So to bring this up in 3ds Max, I wanted to show you the final result that we have here. You can see that I took the car shell itself and I UV'd it, and we created those textures just like we did there, and that's been applied. I also went through and painted in just kind of a black color on my texture. So inside of Photoshop, what we'll do is we'll create a new layer, and we'll use just a black color, and we could paint in where our glass is supposed to be. So I can just come in and just paint right on top of that. And I like to use layers. Okay, so make sure you layer everything out so that way you don't overwrite anything and destroy any of your texture. So I just basically painted that in, just like doing so. Now I did it with a pen, so it was a little bit easier then. So inside of 3ds Max, that's been painted out. We save our texture inside of Photoshop. So we'll do File, Save As, and that'll be inside of our Images folder. And normally I'll just save it as like a JPEG. Now, in order to save as JPEG, you need to make sure that your image or your mode is set to 8-bit, not 16. So we'll do File, Save As, and we'll set this to JPEG. So here you can see that I have my car shell diffuse, which is the texture map that is applied inside of 3ds Max. It's got all of my textures, my text, the little decal that we just created. I also created a little sticker and then the color of that glass there. Okay, and then you'll save that as whatever name. And then once you've saved that, you'll come into 3ds Max and you'll go to your materials. And so you'll start setting up your materials with all of your textures. So as we can see here, we have several materials to choose from. So this first one is actually the car shell material, and it has my texture that's been applied to that. So I can expand that out so you can see that a little bit closer and see exactly what that looks like. Now I also have what's called a bump map, which is basically just a grayscale image. Okay. Now you'll notice that in the gray areas, I've replaced that with a gray color. And then on the areas where we have our decals and our stickers, we have this white area. Now that white area is going to be pushed up, so it's creating detail without actually adding geometry. We have that in the place of the stickers, and then you'll see that I have like these little black lines that are actually right up here on my object. So if I were to render this out, and actually I could go to Shaded Materials and then Shaded Materials with Maps. This will change to a checker pattern here in just moments. Let me go ahead and switch this over to maybe Realistic with Maps. Give that just a moment to update. And you can see here that it's created kind of this bumped geometry. You can also see it on our car here, and that's all from that bump map. And that's plugged into our bump channel. All right. So I have PSD files that are included with your project file. So if you want to take a look at how these textures were created, you have those available. You can open those up in Photoshop, get an idea of how that was created. It's totally up to you on that process. It's the exact same process that we used to create the original diffuse texture, except we're using a grayscale image of that. So now that we've taken a look at how to create textures in Photoshop, how they're applied to the model, and even a little bit about bump maps, while that is all extra, you've gone through quite an extensive course here to learn about all of the different modeling tools and techniques that you will use more than likely across all of your models and all of your projects from here on out. So I can just really encourage you to continue to practice and follow through with more tutorials. And once you have the hang of modeling, you might want to move into something like UV texturing and learning that process. We have courses on those and how to do that, and even courses on how to paint textures. So I hope you guys had fun. I really did during this course, and I'll see you guys next time.